morning. I have something really special to share with you before we get started on making our quilt today. I do quilts for people. I do long arm quilting for people, and I wanted to share a real piece of beauty that I have just received from someone and that I quilted for them, and I can't stand it until I'm able to share it. You'll notice that this is in a plastic bag. I keep everything so it's safe and secure in a plastic bag for each quilt that comes in. This quilt is a quilt that was designed by Tilda, who is a very famous and wonderful quilt artist and designer. And this is also her fabric. This is her Christmas quilt from 2024. And the customer that I made this for, it took her about probably 6 months to make this quilt, and when I show it to you, you'll see why. The precision is just so accurate and wonderful, but the beauty of this quilt is in the fabrics and in the design. So here we go in showing you this lovely quilt. This is a Christmas quilt, and as you'll notice, there's all kinds of Christmas things on it. There's Santa's sleigh. There's a wreath at the top. A garland at the top. There's reindeer. There's stockings. There's Christmas trees. And all I did to finish off this quilt for my customer was I quilted it with the design that she chose. But I just had to share it with you because it's one of the top quilts that I've done this year, and it is so lovely. As you progress along your skills in making quilts, you're someday, if you stick with it, going to be able to make something this beautiful, this intricate, and this wonderful. Now that I've shared, let me fold this back up and we'll get started with today's lesson. I'm going to just talk you through as a reminder of what we have already done. In our first session, we prepared. We got everything ready to go. We gathered all our materials. We got a layer cake so that we would have our fabrics already pre-cut. And from there, we played with our fabric, I should say, and put it into a nice arrangement of 6 rows across and 7 rows down so that we would have a 60 by 70 inch quilt. And after that, we actually started sewing those pieces together in rows. So that's where we've come so far, but today we need to get that quilt top finished so that we can actually complete our quilt in the next couple of sessions. Since the last time I saw you, I have completed all of the different rows for our quilt. And I'm really quite happy with it. I think it looks very, very nice. It's got light and dark and light, really well situated throughout the whole quilt. And it shows all of the different patterns. And so I think we're ready to go. I don't really want to change anything or do anything. I only made one mistake while I was sewing my rows together, and I have to share that with you. Some of these fabrics are directional fabrics, like this owl. This owl, if you want him to not be on his head, he has to be facing up, okay? And there are some other fabrics. You don't want your trees to be upside down. You want your trees to be facing up. So no matter what you're using in fabric, make sure that if something needs to be facing a certain direction, that it faces that direction so you don't get something silly in your quilt that you'll laugh at for a long time in the future. And not all of these are that way, but the acorns were that way, the owls were that way, the trees were that way. I think that's pretty much it. But it's really important that you're satisfied with your product when you get it finished and you don't have to undo things. And luckily, as I was sewing, I found one of my fabrics was upside down. So I quickly unpicked it and made it right. What we're going to do today is we're going to take these down and we're going to sew row 1 to row 2, row 2 to row 3, and so on down the way. But there's some important steps that we really have to do before we get that started. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to do some pressing and some ironing. And of course, it's important that we keep these rows in the order that they're in, because we've worked really hard to make it look nice and we don't want to get things mixed up. So I'm going to just be working with a couple rows at a time and working from there and adding on to it. So that's what our project is for today, is to press, make sure everything is good, and from there sew the quilt together. Now, there's a very important little step that we'll be taking as we iron. You'll notice that these all have seams. I want these seams to match up, okay? But I don't want these seams to be bulky and thick where they meet. And so we're going to do what's called staggering of the seams or nesting of the seams, so that the seam on one row will go one way and the seam on the next row will wedge into it going the other way. And we do that by just an easy math example. Everything that we do in an odd row, like number 1, number 3, number 5, the odd rows, we're going to press them to the left, and the even rows, we're going to press the seams to the right. And I'll show you that when I get to my iron, and we can talk about it a little bit more. Also, just as a heads up, when I talk about pressing, I'm not pressing like I'm ironing something very hard with a swish swish motion. I'm talking about a very light motion, just a press where you press it down. And you'll notice that, and I'll show you as an example when we get together. You don't need to stretch your fabric. You don't need to stretch it this way. You don't need to stretch it this way. You just need to keep it where it is, but you do need to make those seams go a certain way so that when we sew it together, it will be a lot better. So let's go ahead and get these down off our wall and go to the ironing board. See you there. Hi, do you like my outfit? I am wearing row 1 and row 2 of my quilt as I get ready to press. So let's get started. If you remember, I told you earlier that when we press our rows, when we press the seams, we're going to be pressing the odd seams to the left, and we're going to be pressing the even seams to the right. And we're going to do this all the way through. So let's get started. First of all, I wanted you to see these perfect seams that we've made and how lovely they are. The first thing that I want to do is I want to do what's called setting the seam with the iron. So you put your fabric down with the right side up, with the side that you're going to see on the quilt. You just take your iron and you just set the seam by putting the iron down onto that seam. We're not pressing it a certain way at this point in time. We're just doing what's called setting the seam. I'm not using a ton of pressure, and I'm also not doing any swish swish motion or any quote unquote ironing. I'm just doing a press to get the thread to press in deep into that fabric so that it stands less chance of coming undone. And you don't have to do it for very long. I am using a light steam, but you don't have to use a light steam. You can use a dry iron and it will be just fine. Okay, so that's row 1, the front. The seams have been set. Now remember, because we're on row 1, we are going to be pressing towards the left. And I've got it marked for myself on the front with an arrow so that I can remember that. So I'm just going to take that again and do that to it. Now this one, it kind of wanted to go its own way, but it's got to go the way of everybody else. So I'm doing that to it. and I'm giving it just a short pump of steam. This doesn't take very long at all, especially since you're not having to do a lot of real ironing or changing of anything. It's just a really quick process, but you'll see why it's so important when we go to nest those seams together. You're probably wondering what that noise is that you keep hearing. That noise is this iron. This iron, the minute that I stop using it and take my hands off it, it throws down some safety features so that it doesn't scorch and it doesn't do any ironing on its own. Okay, so row 1 is ironed and complete, and now I'm going to row 2. Remember, the first step is you set your seams. And if you want something to do, maybe you could count to 3. The setting on my iron is a cotton setting, which is a relatively hot setting. I don't know that I'd go any higher than that. That should be sufficient for what we're doing. Just a slight press. If you want to count to 3, that's a good thing to do. 1, 2, 3, up. Then we turn it over. Remember, this time we're going to press to the right. To the right. And I've got that marked right there on my paper so that that tells me the direction that I need to go. So here we go. That one didn't want to stay down very well. And if you want it to stay down just a minute longer, you can just hold it there, but you don't need to press it into place so much. And you don't need to swoosh your fabric towards it or anything. Just take care of the seam, don't take care of anything on the fabric. You don't want to stretch your fabric and make it go out of place. These have turned out lovely. They went the way they should have gone right from the beginning. So this has been a relatively easy task. This is such an important task though, you really should do it. Okay, I'm ready to go now. So I'm going to put my iron away and I'll show you how we put these together with clips, and then we'll be ready to sew. All right, here comes the fun part. We're going to put our rows together. I am going to keep my labeling on these rows. This says row 1, this says row 2. Obviously those are going to go together, but I don't want to get them mixed up later on and these end up in the middle of my quilt where they weren't really planned. So what we're going to do is we're going to take row 1 and we're going to flip it over so that both of the right sides of our fabric are together. And our biggest effort here is that we are going to take these seams, these little seams, and make sure that they're what we call nested. Now remember, we pressed one going this way and we pressed the other one going that way. So if that's what happened, that's great. You need to take and you need to line up that seam line or your thread line. You need to line it up so that the thread lines lie on top of each other and the seams go in 2 directions. So I'll show you both sides. This one's going that way, this one's going that way, and I've got my seams lined up. Now for now, I'm just going to take a clip and clip that together like that. And I'm going to try to make it so that it holds down those seams, okay? And then I'm just going to go down the rest of the row and do that. And it's really quite easy. Make sure that when you're doing it, that you're also keeping everything lined up so that you've got a straight edge going diagonally also. your seams will be going vertically. So this doesn't take that long, but it's so, so needful for you to do this so that your quilt isn't bulky and funny. And if you ever forget which way, just in case, you can just look at the one on the other side and you've got the example that you need to follow. Line up the raw edges together, put your seams together and make sure they're going in opposite directions, and clip. Line up your tops together. My dog is deciding she needs a bone, but she really doesn't, so I apologize for that sound. Line up your tops. Make sure that those seams go different directions and clip. At the very end, you should also be clipping, and at the very front of your quilt also, it's a good idea to clip. I didn't do that to begin with, but I'm going to go back and do it. And now we're ready to sew row 1. Now, you're going to ask a really good question, and that question is, what do I do when I come to those clips? I can't sew over those clips. I can't sew around them. What should I do? Well, if you're not feeling good about it, I just wait until I'm right there and I'm going to sew over them, and then I just take them out. But I do sew with them in. The other thing that I do is, just to keep things kind of together, I take a pin and I pin it in the center of these so that there's not going to be any shifting. If you feel more secure with pins than you do with clips, then I suggest you use pins all the way. However, if you are using pins, please don't sew over your pins. It's not good for your sewing machine. It's not good on your needles. Your needles could break on you and cause problems. And it's just better to make sure that everybody's safe and that you're keeping your sewing machine in good working order by not running a bunch of stuff over different objects, including your hand. Try to keep your hands out of the way. Okay, now with all of those things done, I am ready to go to the sewing machine and we can get this baby put together. Okay, we're ready to sew. Let me remind you of just a couple of things before we get started. Check your bobbin to make sure that your bobbin has well over half of a bobbin filled. It's better to start, if you can, with a new one. We've already started with a brand new needle. You don't need to change your needle again unless it broke on the last time that you were sewing. I have my 1/4-inch foot on my machine. I have my machine set at a straight stitch. I'm going to change it to a straight quilting stitch. And the beeping that you hear is the numbers that I'm going to. And I'm ready to go. Those are the things that I'm looking at. Remember, don't sew over anything except for fabric. I'm putting my presser foot down now, and we're going to sew. Keep that foot going right along the edge. Okay. Now I'm coming to a clip, and remember, we promised we wouldn't run over those. So I make sure that it's lined up the way that it's supposed to be lined up, and it is. It stayed in place nicely. With those clips in place, it makes it so nice because you don't have to worry about your fabric shifting on you or anything going any place that you don't want it to go. It stays in place really, really well for you. I'm just using both of my hands to guide this. When I come to a clip, I take it off and we go on. That one caught just a little bit. Sorry about that. So this is relatively an easy step. It takes a little bit of time, but it's fun time. And you'll be glad that you took the appropriate amount of time to do it accurately. And we're coming to the end, our very last seam here. I'm just straightening that out a little bit, getting rid of that clip. Going to the end, and remember you're going to sew off of your fabric and leave a tail so that your stitches don't come undone. There's my tail. There's my first row completed. Okay, now you can see what kind of work you did. I'm sure that you've done a great job as you've been going along. I'm going to take out my pins so I can take a look at those seams. And let's hold up our partially made quilt. Oh, perfect. Look at those seams. They match up so nicely. I'm going to put this here so you can see how well they match up. See how those are just really nicely together. One isn't further over than the other. They really look good. I'm really very pleased with the way this has turned out. And now what we're going to do is we'll go and get row 3 and do the exact same thing that we did before. And I'm going to do that on my own. It is the exact same process that we just did here. You're going to add a row every single time to this, so it's just going to get longer, and you're just going to open it up and be surprised and happy with what you've done. Those seams, each of those seams looks really good. And I hope that you'll have that much success with yours also. So I'll see you back here when this quilt top is totally put together. In video 4, what we're going to do is, obviously this is not going to be our quilt, okay? You don't want this to be seen, the back to be seen like this. What we're going to do is we're going to put what's called batting, or a filler, in between this layer and the backing layer. So what we're going to do in our next episode is we're going to prepare the batting. I'll show you different battings, and I'll show you how to cut it and get it to the size that you want so that it'll be perfect. And then we're going to take fabric and we're going to put that on the back and layer those three things, the front, the batting, and the back. We're going to layer that into 3 pieces, and we're going to stabilize it with pins or with glue. I'll show you various ways that you can do that so that you can actually quilt it so that the 3 layers come together and are secure and won't come apart at any time. So that's our next session, but you're well on your way to being a successful quilter. And you should be really proud of yourself by this time that you have done such a great job. Looking forward to seeing you next time. Happy sewing!